The Silent Dragon's Lullaby. The chamber smelled faintly of incense and metal. 1,000 tiny machines hummed in the shadows, their lights blinking in rhythm with the faint, ragged breaths of the dragon who lay before her. Orith, the last of his kind, the one they called the Eternal Flame, rested in a vast cradle of stone and steel, his scaled body unmoving save for the subtle rise and fall of his chest. Mira dipped her cloth into warm water, wrung it out, and gently wiped the dust from the dragon's snout. Her hand, though small against the massive ridges of his scales, moved with practiced care. She spoke to him as she worked, though her voice was barely above a whisper. "You must have seen wonders," she said softly. "Worlds burning, skies opening, armies fleeing. But here you are, resting like a child. If you can hear me, Orith, you're not alone." Her words echoed faintly against the domed ceiling of the sanctuary. Few caretakers came here anymore. To most, Orith was a relic, an ancient beast locked in a half-death. But Mira believed otherwise. She had seen the flutter of his eyelids once, the twitch of a talon when she hummed a tune. She believed he was listening. She set aside the cloth and drew in a slow breath. The chamber was still, save for the thrum of machines. Then, she began to sing. The melody was simple, old, one of the lullabies her grandmother had sung to her back on Earth, long before the stars became her home. Her voice carried warmth, threading through the vast space with gentleness, as if weaving an invisible blanket over dragon and stone alike. Sleep now, rest now, shadows can't remain. Orith's breathing deepened, almost imperceptibly. Mira smiled faintly. She leaned closer, the sound of her song flowing like a stream in the silence. Unseen by her, high above in the gallery hidden behind carved stone, another figure watched. Cloaked in black, face hidden beneath the hood of his mantle, the Emperor stood with hands clasped behind his back. His guards had been dismissed. No one knew he came here. He told himself he visited the sanctuary to observe the relic, to weigh whether keeping the dragon alive was worth the Empire's resources. Yet every time he entered, his gaze never lingered long on Orith. It fixed instead on the woman at his side, the caretaker whose voice stirred memories he had buried deep. Her song clawed at the armor around his heart. Long ago, in the broken years of his childhood, he had heard that very same voice. Not in a grand hall or a throne room, but in a cramped shelter, when he was nothing but an orphan boy. He remembered small hands holding his fevered one, a woman whispering comfort while war raged outside. He had been told later that such memories were weakness, distractions for rulers. Yet here they returned, vivid and undeniable. Mira, oblivious to her unseen audience, continued her work. After the song faded, she placed a hand on Orith's chest. "If you can hear me," she whispered, "you've carried a burden long enough. Rest easy. The world is quieter now." The Emperor's throat tightened. Quiet? For her, perhaps. For him, the galaxy never stilled. His empire stretched across thousands of systems, but unrest and rebellion simmered everywhere. He had built power on fear and iron law, but the peace he maintained was brittle. And yet, when she sang, he almost believed there could be another way. Mira stood, stretched her weary arms, and began tidying her supplies. She never knew how much time passed in these visits. Hours slipped by when she sang. To her, it was simply duty, though one she cherished. To the dragon, it was hope. And to the Emperor, watching unseen, it was something else entirely. It was memory. It was home. He turned to leave, his boots soundless on the gallery floor. He would not speak tonight. Perhaps not tomorrow. She could not know who he was, not yet. For now, he would remain the shadow, the silent witness to her lullabies. But as he stepped into the dark corridors beyond the chamber, one truth pressed heavier than his crown. Mira was not just the dragon's caretaker. She was his. And she did not even know. The Emperor's burden. The imperial palace towered above the city like a mountain of glass and steel, its spires piercing the sky. From his throne, the Emperor surveyed the gathered ministers and generals, their voices droning in endless reports. Trade disputes in the outer colonies. A rebellion flaring on the desert moons of Khazra. Rumors of foreign fleets testing the Empire's borders. He listened, but his thoughts were elsewhere, back in the sanctuary, back with the song. And therefore, your radiance, it may be time to dismantle the sanctuary entirely, Minister Valen concluded. The dragon is a useless relic, and the resources poured into keeping it alive could be better spent on fortifications. The Emperor's eyes, cold and unreadable, fixed on the man. Valen faltered beneath the gaze. "The dragon remains," the Emperor said at last. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of finality. None dared challenge it. The chamber fell silent. Only the flickering of holomaps lit the vast hall. Ministers bowed and scribbled notes, but the Emperor's thoughts had already withdrawn. Later, in the solitude of his private chambers, he shed the ceremonial armor that seemed less like protection and more like a cage. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, a stern face framed by a crown of metal and light, eyes sharp and merciless. The galaxy saw only the Emperor, the iron-fisted ruler who commanded fleets and crushed revolts with a single decree. But beneath that mask lay memories he could never voice. He remembered a boy, skinny, cold, and unwanted, left behind in the chaos of war. The Empire had no place for orphans of unknown blood. He should have died nameless. But Mira had found him, taken him in, and given him shelter. She had fed him when she had little for herself, bandaged his wounds, and sung him to sleep when nightmares raged. He remembered clinging to her hand as fever racked his body. He remembered her voice, weaving courage into his bones when he was too weak to stand. And then, he remembered the day the soldiers came. The Empire's recruitment squads had swept through the shelters, searching for potential candidates. They had seen something in him: sharp eyes, fierce defiance, raw strength. They tore him from Mira's arms, promising her he would be useful. She had cried out, tried to hold him back, but the soldiers had struck her down. His last glimpse of her was through the slats of a transport cage, her voice calling his name. He had never forgotten it. They had trained him, broken him, reshaped him into a weapon. He clawed his way up through the ranks, from nameless recruit to commander, from commander to warlord, until the galaxy knelt before him. Yet for all the titles and victories, he had buried the boy who once listened to lullabies. He had buried Mira, or so he thought. Now she lived again before him, unchanged by years, her voice still gentle, her hands still steady. She did not know him. To her, he was just another shadow passing through the sanctuary's halls. But to him, she was everything he had lost, and everything he could never admit. The Emperor paced to the window, staring out at the endless city below. Millions of lights glittered, a galaxy condensed into one sprawling monument of power. And yet, in all those lights, there was no warmth. Only Mira's song had pierced the emptiness. His advisors called kindness weakness. They urged him to rule through fear alone. And he had, because fear worked. Fear built fleets. Fear kept rebellious systems in line. Fear had forged an empire out of chaos. But when Mira sang, he remembered another truth. That once, someone had chosen compassion over survival, and that choice had saved him. A knock broke his reverie. His aide, Lord Kale, entered with a bow. "Your Radiance, the council awaits your decision regarding the Khazra uprising." The Emperor turned, his expression once again the mask of cold authority. "Tell them we march at dawn." Kale bowed, retreating swiftly. When the chamber was empty once more, the Emperor allowed his hand to tighten into a fist. The burdens of empire pressed heavy on his shoulders, yet in the silence between wars and councils, it was not power he longed for. It was her voice. Her song had reached the boy buried beneath the crown, and he did not know if he could keep him hidden much longer. The staring of the dragon. The sanctuary had always been still. The hiss of air pumps, the quiet hum of life support conduits, the low flicker of lantern light against Orith's scales, these were constants. Mira had grown used to the rhythm of silence. But tonight, something was different. As she wiped the dragon's brow and began her nightly song, she felt the faintest tremor ripple through the stone beneath her feet. Her voice faltered for a heartbeat, then steadied. "Sleep. Now. Rest now. Shadows can't remain." Her song filled the chamber. Orith's chest rose with greater force, a deep shuddering breath escaping between his teeth. Mira's heart skipped. She leaned close, watching as his eyelids fluttered faintly, almost imperceptibly. "You hear me, don't you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The machines registered nothing unusual, no alarms blared, no readings spiked, but Mira trusted her instincts. Something inside the dragon was waking. High above, in the gallery, The Emperor stood as he always did, silent and unseen. But unlike before, his own pulse quickened. He had witnessed this moment from afar. The twitch of a claw, the stirring of a wing. It was no reflex. The dragon was responding. And to whom? Not to the machines, not to the healers who had long abandoned hope. No, Orith responded only to her. The Emperor gripped the railing. His ministers would call it dangerous. They feared Orith as much as they despised him. A living dragon could ignite rebellions across the galaxy. He was a symbol of old wars, of fire and destruction. For decades, the Emperor had allowed Orith to linger, neither alive nor dead, because deep inside, he had not wanted to strip Mira of her hope. But now, if Orith woke, the Empire itself might tremble. Far below, Mira finished his song. The silence that followed was thicker than before, weighted with expectation. Orith's tail gave the faintest twitch, the movement so subtle Mira thought she had imagined it. Tears welled in her eyes. "You're still in there," she breathed. "I knew it." She placed her palm on his chest. The scales were cool, but beneath them she felt a vibration, a slow, rumbling echo, as if a heartbeat stirred after centuries of stillness. In that instant, Orith dreamed. The dragons saw fire, cities burning, his kin falling one by one to steel and plasma. He had fought until his body failed him, until darkness claimed him. But amid the storm, a voice sang, a fragile human voice, threading through flame and ruin. He followed it through the void, clinging to its warmth. Now, it called again, pulling him back from the abyss. His eyes flickered open for the briefest instant. Mira gasped. She had seen it, slits of gold flashing beneath heavy lids. "You're waking," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she touched his snout. "You're truly waking." Above, the Emperor's jaw tightened. The ministers would hear of this soon. Had spies even here? He could already hear their arguments echoing in council chambers. Kill the dragon. Destroy it before it stays rebellion. But looking down at Mira, he could not bring himself to allow it. He remembered the way she once shielded him from soldiers, a frail woman defying armored giants. She had given him life when the galaxy would have let him die. And now, she was giving life to the last dragon. The following day, whispers spread across the palace. Healers reported anomalies in Orith's vitals, increased pulse, stronger breath, twitching muscles. Rumors ran faster than reports. "The dragon stays," servants whispered. "The end of an age is nigh." In the council chamber, Minister Valen was first to speak. "Your Radiance, the sanctuary must be closed at once. This awakening cannot be permitted. A dragon reborn will fracture the Empire's stability." Others agreed, fear thick in their voices. "The people will rally to it. They always saw dragons as divine. Let this one rise, and we lose control." The Emperor listened, his face unreadable. Inside, conflict roared. To kill Orith would silence rebellion before it began, but it would also silence Mira's hope. To protect the dragon was to risk the Empire itself. At last, he spoke. "The sanctuary remains untouched." Gasps echoed. Protests followed, but a single glare from his eyes silenced them. That night, Mira sang again, unaware of the storm her devotion had unleashed. Orith's breathing grew stronger with each note, and Mira swore she felt the faint rumble of his voice, deep and hidden, humming with hers. Above, the Emperor watched in silence, the weight of Empire heavy on his shoulders. He knew this was only the beginning. The dragon was waking, and with him, the boy he had buried long ago. Revelation of the fastest son. The air in the sanctuary was different. Mira felt at the moment she stepped inside. The hum of machines seemed quieter, the shadows less heavy. Orith's chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. Not the shallow breaths of endless slumber, but something deeper, stronger. Her hands trembled as she approached. For weeks now, he had stirred, responding to her songs. Tonight, she sensed more than stirring. She sensed awakening. She settled onto her stool, drew in a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice wavered at first, then grew strong, filling the chamber with warmth. The lullaby carried across Orith's vast frame, through the machines, and into silence itself. This time, the silence broke. A low, rumbling sound rose from deep within Orith's chest. Not mechanical, not artificial, alive. His eyelids shuttered, then peeled open. Golden eyes, vast and ancient, blinked against the light. Mira's song faltered into stunned silence. "Orith," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. The dragon's gaze found her. For a moment, it was confusion, then recognition, not of a name, but of a voice. His mouth opened, and a whisper like mountains grinding together escaped. "Your songs," his voice cracked with centuries of disuse. "Bind life, where fire once consumed." Mira pressed a trembling hand to his snout. "You've come back," she said, her voice breaking. "I knew you could." Above, in the gallery, the Emperor could no longer remain still. For weeks he had watched in silence. But Orith's awakening was more than he could hide. He stepped from the shadows, his cloak trailing, his boots ringing against the stone steps as he descended. Mira turned at the sound. Her eyes widened as the cloaked figure approached. She fell to her knees instinctively, for even here in the sanctuary, none could mistake the Emperor's presence. "Your radiance," she stammered. The Emperor stopped before her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with hands that had once commanded armies, he lifted back his hood. The mask of iron authority slipped, revealing not the ruler of 1,000 worlds, but the boy Mira had once held. Her breath caught. "It can't be," she whispered. My child." The Emperor's gaze wavered, his composure cracking. "It is I, Mira," he said softly, voice raw. "The boy you once called your son." Memories flooded her, his fevered body in her arms, his small hand clutching hers, the soldiers tearing him away. She had thought him lost forever, swallowed by the machine of empire. Yet here he stood, taller, harder, cloaked in titles and power. And yet, still her child. Tears blurred her vision as she reached for him. "My son," she said, her voice breaking. "My sweet boy." For the first time in decades, the Emperor let himself be held. He fell to his knees, the weight of crown and empire forgotten, and embraced her. His shoulders shook. The ruler of galaxies wept like a child in his mother's arms. Orith watched with eyes that glowed like fire. His chest rumbled, not in anger but in something older, approval. The sight of a mother's embrace, of a son unmasking his soul, struck deeper than the weapons that had once felled him. "You sing, and you heal," Orith whispered, his breath warm against them both. "Not just me. Him, too." Mira looked up at the dragon, then back at her son. She smiled through her tears. "We heal each other." The following day, the palace reeled. Word spread of the dragon's awakening. Rivals whispered of omens and rebellion. Ministers plotted, generals warned of war. But amid the storm, the Emperor appeared before them not as the distant, unyielding figure they feared, but with Mira at his side. He declared the dragon would live. That compassion was not weakness, but strength. That the empire would not be built on fear alone. Some scoffed, some trembled, but the people, those who heard the tale of the Emperor kneeling to his foster mother, of the dragon awakened by human song, found hope. For the first time in generations, they saw their ruler as more than iron and crown. They saw him as human. That night, the sanctuary was quiet again. Mira sang once more, her voice carrying through the chamber. This time, Orith's eyes remained open, watching her with reverence. At his side, the Emperor knelt, not as ruler, but as son. The song wove around them, binding dragon, Emperor, and mother together. And when the last note faded, silence did not return. It was filled with breath, with heartbeat, with life. Where dragons had slept and empires hardened, a mother's song had woken them both.